standards of ADUs and what other cities have approved, they range.
Councilwoman Mungo speaking. She's the only Republican.
800, but not many are at 1,000. And so, at least in the staff report, is there a specific reason why we're not going closer to
That's pretty compelling.
the other cities provided in the staff report?
The reason is just looking at this is a very large city, and just looking at the vast variety of lot sizes in the city. We just talked about the lot size, the average lot size, and the most numerous are when in zoning. But if you think about Los Cerritos or other neighborhoods, for example, there are very, very large lot sizes. So we arrived at that 1,000 square feet based upon looking at the very wide variety of lot sizes throughout the city.
So I guess my thought would be if we could come up with something where if the lot size was 4,500 and below, you would get the maximum allowable build of 600 square feet. Then if you're between 4,500 and 6,500, you could be in the 800 square feet. And then that would give the room that you needed on, say, a 12,000 square foot lot. I just recognize that even in the 5th district today, we have 5,000 square foot lots with 961 square foot homes on them. And so in that particular case, they wouldn't be able to go above 481, I would guess. That's 50% of the current dwelling.
Well, I think that certainly could be an approach, but again, if you go back and look at the intent of how the structure of the standards that were recommended by staff, we think that the lot size in and of itself, combined with the size of the existing unit, will self-limit the size that's allowed for the accessory dwelling unit. And I think you could get to a point where you, I dare to use the term overthink it or overregulate it. But I think that if the direction from the council is to be able to limit the unit size, we think that that's a fair approach, and we think that the limit that has been proposed of 800 square feet would certainly achieve the council's
Robert
general
Hernandez
objective
is here.
of allowing uses,
Where have you been, Robert?
but still not
Robert
allowing them to
Hernandez is
be too significant. So I think it could be cumbersome to try to go to a tiered system, but if that's council's desire, it's something we could certainly look at. I'd hate to try to craft what that would look like up here at the dais.
So there was so much said, and I appreciate you so much, Linda. I think that you're one of the stronger staff members that I've spoken with on anything planning. I respect your history and all the work you do, and I appreciate that staff has a position, and I think that I appreciate you advocating for that position, but I think that the staff report is sufficient in that area. And so I think that what we're doing now is trying to engage in a dialogue among those of us who represent the community and have heard from the community what their concerns are. And as much as overthinking it sounds terrible, I actually don't think it sounds terrible at all, because if we don't do that significant amount of thinking, someone is going to be living next door to something that's not appropriate. And so I'll hold off on a friendly amendment and listen to my colleagues before I decide where I want to go from here. Thank you.
Councilmember Schaper now.
Thank you. I'd like to get to a part of the presentation involving parking. And actually, Carrie Ty described a different scenario from the presentation. Within the presentation, I think it was stated that if a two-car garage is converted, parking for 2 cars must be provided. So my question is, considering our muni code states that you cannot park in the driveway once a garage is converted, where would those cars park?
Councilman Supernaw, yes, to clarify that, with traditional structures and uses, that is correct. However, based on what the state law limits our ability to do, we have to allow parking in various configurations that otherwise would not be a
Parking is a huge issue.
A duplex or a single family home or a triplex. So for accessory dwelling
That
units,
to me
for
is the
example,
biggest
tandem
question.
parking is
Where
allowed.
are they going to put
But
the
that wouldn't
cars?
be allowed for.
Because it
a
could turn into
single-family
Huntington
home or
Park really
duplex.
fast,
So
where
parking
there's
in the
no
driveway,
room at all.
is allowed. And also, as long as you, I mean, there are certain setback regulations, like in the front setback, nobody can park in the front setback, and that would not be made available to ADUs. But certain exceptions and changes have to be made to accommodate parking on site for ADUs.
Okay, so if the scenario would be an attached garage where there's only one car, an attached two-car garage, only one car lane on that double car pad in front of the driveway. That would be allowed once the two-car garage is converted to allow parking right there in front of the house.
That's correct.
Okay, so that does not apply to any other situation. So I'm thinking, if you understand that from the council position, this would be a tough one to explain to constituents. Why is it allowed for my neighbor but not for me? So I would like to have an official explanation so I can pass it on to the neighbors. So anyway, you've clarified it, so thank you for that. Also, another topic would be parking impacted areas. And you had a map up there for just a second, but I believe parking impacted areas do not include necessarily preferential parking districts. Would that be correct?
Yes, there are some preferential parking districts that are within the parking impacted areas.
But my question is just the opposite. There are some that are not in.
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
Okay, therefore, we can designate
Hey,
that
Freddie, how
an
are
area
you?
is so
Happy National
impacted
Hispanic Heritage
that you
Month.
have a
Build
preferential
that
parking
wall.
district,
Build
but it
that
doesn't
wall.
qualify under this ordinance.
That is correct. It would not qualify as being exempted
Now, okay, so
based upon current state law.
now if we change that here, would that comport with state law?
My understanding is that we are, that we can make findings for special local circumstances and conditions, that would have to be, valid and measurable and adopted by the city council in order to do further exemptions, such as the parking, the designated parking impacted areas.
Okay, so, since, my district does not have, it's not a, parking impacted area, but we probably have more preferential parking districts than any other district in the city. I guess I could ask that to be added as an amendment, that I would support this, given that designation, if my colleagues accept that. If not, I wouldn't be able to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Gonzalez.
Yes, thank you for the information and staff report. So I would also like to support the motion by Councilwoman Price. I actually sat down with all of our respective historic districts about a month ago and had a really good conversation with each of them, and in the Wilmore City area and in the first district. But we spoke in length about many of these issues, and of course about 800 feet was brought up, and also being able to provide green space, because you figure in downtown, I know in the Wilmore City area, we are very dense. We do have about 1,100 students coming to the downtown area, and I'm sure even more. They'll have housing, but there'll be more attraction to the area. And thinking about how to provide more housing in a way that would be mindful, not just throwing, 1,000 square feet or, a large lot in back of another large house. I think this is a really reasonable concept, and I think Maureen, I know we spoke in length about this. I think the Belmont Heights group as well. And so I like that motion. I think it's fantastic. I would also like us to just think, of course, overall about historic districts. I know we constantly do, but just to continue keeping that in our discussions here. So I'll be supportive of that measure. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilwoman Price.
By my colleagues. So if, I think Council Member Superdaw's friendly, if we can implement that additional parking factor into the ordinance is something I would welcome wholeheartedly. So for staff, is that something that we can fold into the ordinance, or are we precluded from going there?
I would defer to the city attorney, but my general understanding is that you can, as long as there are findings made as a part of the statement as to its impact on the surrounding neighborhood in the area.
And I would agree with that. I think obviously, we don't have any case law or test case on this, so we would have to make significant findings that it is impacted in order to include that, but we could certainly attempt to do that. We certainly can't do all of these amendments tonight. We would have to bring it back to you for a first reading again after, depending on how your motion goes and the amendments.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that. So, and I too appreciate the report given by staff, and I think I started my comments with that, but I think it's worth mentioning that when staff presents a report to us, it need not be stated that staff has done an incredible amount of work in reaching the proposal to begin with. I think our job as policymakers is to listen to our constituents and then implement the will of our constituents.
Please share this as
in
much as you
light of
can.
Staff's recommendations. So,
Thank you.
You know, I will say that kind of volunteering, again, why staff chose 1,000 over the others, is definitely not necessary in this situation, because we understand that staff has done the work and made that recommendation. And while we respect it, the questions are really targeted at what can this policy bear in light of what our residents are telling us. So I think there's a level of advocacy there that maybe isn't as productive to the conversation, because I understand that staff's recommendation is a thoughtful one. And generally speaking, I think in the 3.5 years that I've been here, there have been very few staff recommendations that I've tweaked or made any changes to. But this one, I think, based on talking with my residents and understanding that this is a state mandate that is really being imposed on the community. Yes, this is really something that they are now having to deal with as a result of state action, that it's our duty to try to mitigate as best we can. So while I appreciate staff's position on it, I want you to know I understand that the 1,000 square feet was a recommendation that was made with a lot of thought and consideration, and I respect and appreciate that. I will say that, you know, one of the questions was asked is if other cities are going with less square feet, why do we need 1,000? And the response was, well, we're a big city. That was one of the responses given. The size of the city, per se, is one factor, but the size of the dwelling, as it relates to the neighborhood and the neighbors living there, is a whole separate analysis. And certainly there are cities that are larger than the city of Long Beach that have adopted maximums that are far less than what staff was proposing. Oakland at 800 square feet, San Jose at 600 to 800 square feet with a maximum of 1 bedroom, Newport Beach with 750 square feet, Santa Monica with 650 square feet, Sacramento County with 400 to 600 square feet, depending on the lot size. So I certainly think that it can be done, and while I understand that 1,000 square feet would provide more living space for individuals, I think if we're truly talking about the intent of this legislation, which is a granny flat, 1,000 square feet is not necessary. Would it be great to have as an option? Absolutely. But I don't believe that it's necessary, nor do I believe that at 800 square feet, people are going to be living in substandard conditions. 800 square feet is certainly not a matchbox living condition by any stretch of the imagination. I was talking to some of my colleagues, and the very first home I was able to buy was slightly larger than that 800 square foot limit, and we had a child in that space, and we started a family there. So I really don't think that 1,000 square feet is a magic number, and anything below that is substandard. So while I appreciate and respect staff's recommendation, I think what staff should be hearing is that we as policymakers are making an effort to effectuate the will of our constituents in light of a state mandate. And that is no reflection at all on the lack of care that was put into staff's recommendation. It simply is responding to our community. So thank you very much, and I ask my colleagues to support me.
Thank you, Councilwoman Rondo.
So is the current, the city attorney stated that a current standard, the current motion would have to come back. We're not prepared to pass anything tonight, is that correct?
Yes, it would come back if passed as currently amended with the 3 amendments that I have listed, we would need to just update the documents, update the ordinance, and make sure we have it all as directed when we bring it back to you for first reading.
Would you mind reading those 3 amendments as you have them?
Certainly. The motion is staff's recommendation with the change to reduce from 1,000 square feet to 800 square feet, or 50%, whichever is less. 2, to increase from 25% to 30% the open space requirement. And 3, to add preferential parking districts to the parking impacted areas under the restricted, where they would be required to provide parking.
And what is the timeline that you think that this would take to come back? And I'm not asking you to rush. I actually see that there's a couple of other major things that are going on in the city, and that the time might bring some value in terms of our better understanding where this fits into things. Are we talking 2 weeks? Are we talking a month? Are we talking 6 weeks?
30 days or less?
Okay, I think there are places in the city, and I get that there's overthinking, but I think there are lots of places in the city where 800 is even too much. As I've mentioned, we have 961 square foot homes on 5,000 square foot lots, and I think that 800 square feet can be, in some cases, too much. I think that lots under 4,500 square feet should be less than 800 square feet ADUs. I also believe that more than 1 bedroom is unacceptable. I think that 1 bedroom is more than enough for an ADU for a granny flat or a mother-in-law's quarters.
Right.
And so I think that there's going to be more time to think about this. And I worry that if it comes back again, that I'm not set on where I want to be on that part of it. So I don't hear from the council that we're far enough along in terms of all of those details. And I recognize that you don't want to have too many details, but if you don't, I feel that the character of our neighborhoods could be in jeopardy. So with that, I don't know that I'm going to be able to support this yet.
Councilman Rungo, if I may, I think if I heard you correctly, if a lot is 4,800 square feet or less, it would not, an ADU would not be allowed on that lot, period, at all.
At all. I appreciate that. What is the minimum lot size for the ADU at this time? 4,800. That is better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're going to go back to the main motion, and that we have the adjustments made by Councilwoman Price. So just to be clear, it's 800, which is the maximum, correct, Mr. City Attorney?
That is correct.
Okay, that was a motion made by Councilman Price. I want to just make sure we clarify also, there was also, we're going to clarify so that the parking issue that Councilman Schaper, that was added as a friendly amendment as well. Mr. City Attorney, we have that?
We have that, and the third item that I have is to increase the, from 25% to 30% the open space requirement.
Okay, great. So members, just go ahead and cast your votes.
Mayor, we need public comment.
I'm so sorry about that. And actually, no, the reason why I did that is because we actually have more council comments. So I'm sorry, we'll be right back. Councilman Mungo.
So what is the bedroom requirement we're at now? We went down from 3, so that makes it 2.
Everybody raised alarm because they wanted to have public comment.
As an option.
So we're still allowing.
They wanted to
up
make
2
public
bedrooms.
comment, and people feared that they weren't going to be able to have a public
Yes,
comment.
that is the current proposal.
Are they? Okay, I'll hear from public comment.
They
Thank
want
you.
her
Okay.
recalled.
Now we're going to go to public comment, and please come forward. Thank you very much.
No, you can't. This is only on this item. These are agenda items. You can only speak on those. Public comment hasn't come up yet. There's going to be a lot of people talking, I think.
I am Francis Emily Dawson Harrison. I reside in District 1. I listened to a lot that was said, and I want to kind of look at it with a wide vision. And although 800 is the ideal number now, I'm going to ask you to look at 900. In terms of the number of bedrooms, I want you to also look at the possibility, because no one knows from moment to moment you can wake up to be and you may need more square footage because you need a place that has
I wouldn't
a
give
larger
it
space for the septic issues.
Hollow Illman's attention, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. The other thing too is larger units, although they're not wanted so much, might be needed because you have some individuals that cannot afford to pay higher rents. And so you have families that are like living in a household and you say 2 bedrooms, 1 bedroom. But unfortunately, you have families that cannot afford to have a smaller unit because you have too many people in the house, and there's too many people that are going to be just crammed into the house. So I understand what you want to do, but we have to look at what's happening right now today. We don't know from moment to moment what's going to happen in terms of federal funding or anything else. In terms of parking, I want you to also look at the fact that there's some families that have a person that's disabled, and they're going to need to have a handicap parking space. And so to have a limit on parking for a housing unit is wonderful.
Okay, everybody, there's going to be extended public comment on this new set of ordinances dealing with additional development units.
There's a concern about the fact that there needs to be loading and unloading zones.
Something that they're going to be returning to as well in the near future.
Access service or Dow would come to pick them up, and if you limit the parking space and you're limiting the area possibly for them to be loaded or unloaded, because not always can family members or friends intervene in terms of helping people to get to where they have to go. I know you have a really awesome amount of information before you, but I'd like you to look at the things that you suggested to you, and I wish you the best, and I believe you'll make a good decision, but please keep these things in mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. Next speaker, please.
I'm Karen Rayside, resident of the 1st District. I live in subsidized HUD housing. I live in a 375 square foot studio apartment along with 200 other people in the building. Some of them have 1 bedrooms, but we're all being moved into the studios so that they can charge market rate for the 1 bedroom. The granny flat originally were for elderly family members that needed to have some help and to keep them close by so they could engage with their families and not be socially isolated. If I can live in 375 square feet, I think that 640 is more than adequate. 800 is luxurious. Now, I've seen some of the existing granny flats that were built in the early recession. I would be more than happy to live in a number of them, especially the ones, some of them in Bixby Knolls or in Belmont Shore. The reason that nobody's talking about rent, cost of rent, this initial discussion was because we're in a housing crisis. With a 2% vacancy rate, we are in crisis in terms of people being able to find affordable housing. Larger buildings are going to cost more in terms of rent. So the buildings need to be smaller. And seniors, I'm going to talk on behalf of Gray Panthers, seniors are being disproportionately affected by these increases in rent, and they're being removed from their places because they tend to stay in facilities for a longer time. They don't move, particularly when they reach a certain age. And as a consequence, they're paying very low rent if the landlords are kind to them. They're quieter tenants. So they don't pay higher rent. So the landlords, especially when buildings are purchased, they're the first ones to go. And if the true intention is to help with our housing crisis, because I see that the people that are going to want granny flats are going to be single mothers, they're going to be students, and they're going to be seniors. And if the rents aren't controlled or monitored, it's not going to help our housing crisis. So, thank you.
No rent control.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
No rent control.
Thank you. I'm Fred Bocher. I'm a general contractor out of San Pedro, and I'm representing my client here regarding this ADU. He has 3 pieces of property in your community, Long Beach, and the things he asked me was ownership, which is a topic which is touched on by your staff, is that if you have ownership of an ADU, that's the only piece of property you can own in the city. And I'm not sure if everybody's aware of that. And because if you have anything more than that, you can't. Because the agreement you're going to sign to get an ADU will say that you can have only one ADU and only one property in the city and in the state. That's my understanding through talking to Mr. Scott, who I've talked with a couple of times already, once on the phone and once in person. And I came by to check that this morning to be sure I was on base, and I am, to say that there can only be one ownership of your assets. My client has 3 pieces of property, and he wants to put an ADU on each of them. Now, there's a way to do that, of course, and a way to do that would be a form of corporation. And that entity, which is a corporation, would own it and not him directly. So I don't know how that's addressed in the paperwork that you have in staff. So if my client forms 3 corporations and the 3 corporations own the property, how can they live on the property? That would be another question. So those are the things I'm concerned about. As far as the general contractor goes, and that's my responsibility in my lifetime, and I build what you tell me I can build, and don't build things you don't tell me. But if you approve something with whatever regulations have with regard to parking, sizes, I comply. Because that's the only way to get a permit to build what you would like me to build, or I can build. As far as being in the size of something, just to add my own personal opinion on that, I think that everything should be at least 1,000 square feet. I was raised in a place that was about 700 square feet, 2 brothers and a sister, mom and dad. So 1,000 square feet would sure be great to have as we grow up. Thank you so kindly for listening.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Hello all. Thank you so much. My name is Kevin Nguyen. I am first of all, I'd like to thank the staff for doing so much work. Thank you. Also, I moved in 2004. I bought this house in West Long Beach, and I'd like to thank Councilwoman Price for bringing up the topic about the size of the lot and stuff. It was built in 1941, so it's a small 861 square foot house in the back of the lot. Rectangular, all usable lot, 6,900 square foot lot. So there's a lot of room, and I've been waiting for this moment here to see if I can. Now that I'm getting older, my wife and I are getting older, in our mid-50s, and we're looking to build on something bigger on our lot. Hopefully retire on that, and we'll rent out our existing home. But if you put restriction on 640 square foot or 50% of that, it doesn't make no sense for us. We've been waiting so long in Long Beach.
Well, these hearings are pretty serious issues that have to be taken care of.
So thank you so much.
It brings up a lot of people that get very concerned about what they can and cannot do with their property.
For thinking of the size of the lot and stuff and putting the restriction limits on the size of the lot, what you can build to. Oh, have a good night, gentlemen.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Ann Cantrell. Granny flats give you a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling, doesn't it? Have Granny living in the backyard. She can help take care of the kids. She can cook for you. But as you've heard from these last 2 speakers, that isn't what a lot of people are envisioning. One wants to be a corporation so they can build a rental house. The other wants to build a bigger house and rent out his second house. that is not what accessory dwelling units are supposed to be about. And I think the bigger you make them, the more likely it is that this is what's going to happen. They're going to be rented out. I notice on this chart that it says that a one-bedroom can be 450 square feet, and a two-bedroom can be 750 square feet. So 800 sounds like it's excessive. I think a lot of cities have, you mentioned some of them, Councilmember Price, but Thousand Oaks has 220 to 660 square feet homes. And Beverly Hills is 650. So you can go a lot lower than 800 square feet. I'm a member of CARP, and I think we recommended 500 square feet. I'm also very concerned about the parking. I think I heard that your parking map with the impacted parking was from 1989. Is that correct? Things have changed a lot since 1989. I think there's a lot more parking impaction all over the city.
Yeah.
And if you allow these granny flats to come, there's going to be quite parking impaction in places that aren't impacted now. So I'm concerned about this parking issue. I think you should do a reevaluation of where the parking impaction is and make some kind of accommodations for the parking that's going needs that are going to be coming with a granny flat. People park on the street, and there's not going to be any place for parking.
Thank you for your testimony. Next speaker, please.
Hi, I'm Corliss Lee from the 5th District, and I belong to 3 separate groups in the city. I belong to CARP, Citizens About Responsible Planning, and I am also on, let's see, we have our neighborhood organization, and then I have one other that I'm involved with. So all 3 of those have been involved in this density issue. And I will tell you that we have not gone forth trying to sell the public against density. All we have to do is show them a map. If we show those density maps to people, they lose it. And I know that Stacy and Daryl have both been to one of those outreach meetings, and you have seen the outrage, how upset people are that you're messing with their property, that you're messing with their life. There are 3 things that are hot buttons that are affecting density, and it's crime.
Yeah.
More people is more crime. It's parking is the other one, and traffic. So those 3 things, if you can solve those 3 things, you can move as many people as you want into the city. But pay attention to those 3, because people are not going to vote for you if they see you as supporting density. Nobody wants increased traffic, increased parking, or increased crime.
But they don't have a choice. That's the problem.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
The city council is between a rock and a hard place. They have to do something.
And I live on the border between the 2nd and 3rd district. And I would like to ask that the city council reduce the allowable size of the ADUs to 800 square feet, or the 50% of the existing primary dwelling, whichever is less. I help deliver our Belmont Heights Community Association newsletters, so I have access to the rear residences, the ADUs, that have already been added to the single-family residence lots under the R2 of 20 years ago. And frankly, most are too big, and they're incongruent with the neighborhood. I know these were built under previous rules, but I fear for the future of livability in our communities if the 1,000 square foot ADUs are approved.
No.
And I would also like to ask that the amount of accompanying open space be increased to 30% from the proposed 25%. When I'm on the delivery route for the newsletters, I've noticed many of the homes with ADUs in the rear are completely cemented in and with very little landscaping. Perhaps, along with the increased open space requirement, the city could encourage even more unpaved areas. This would allow for the rains to soak into the earth rather than flood our streets and run into the ocean unused.
Right.
In the summer, more unpaved areas around the homes with ADUs would cut down on the heat from the added buildings. And I think the above adjustments to the proposed plan could lead to a more sustainable city for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
I'm speaking to parking. Traffic and parking is going to be impacted with these ADUs. With the minimums that they have to have for their own parking spaces, keep in mind that they have visitors coming into the communities as well.
Yeah.
And I think that the highly dense communities need to have permits and time limits that they can't park in the residential areas. Because with the 3 new buildings that are being built in the area here, it's just getting impossible to find parking in the community.
Right.
So I ask that you take that into consideration, parking permits for your residents that are in densely populated areas, as well as I noticed on 1 street, 4th near Alamedos, 2 blocks of that, it's only 1 hour parking. And then you go 1 block over, it's 2 hour parking. And I thought that that's extremely odd, that that's a primarily residential street, and that they would get an hour on a street and a business area get 2 hours. It just doesn't seem right. So 4th, Alamedos, and in addition, again, traffic, turning signals. It boggles my mind why there's not a left turn signal on every major intersection in the city. That's something so simple that you could do.
Yeah.
When we got the countdown traffic lights, I thought, okay, money thrown at that. Why not turning signals? You have the bike, like on 1 street, there's 8 or 9, 10 traffic lights where the bikes are. But yet we cannot seem to get from each district turning signals on the major intersections that would at least alleviate some of the traffic when people are coming and going during rush hours.
Yeah.
In addition, I would really love to see those bike lanes be rid of.
Yeah.
On the on-ramps and off-ramps to the freeway. Of all the places you all could have put that,
I wish Gary
it makes
Galeno were
no
here.
sense.
This
Given
is
all
Agenda
the
21
activity,
hurting average
given all
people.
the events that Long Beach does,
gotta put a stop
given
to
all
this
the
nonsense.
popularity, all the people that have moved into Long Beach being now the it city, that we should have that there. When you have the off-ramp from the 710 coming and going 3rd, 6th, 7th, put them somewhere else. I'm not against bicycling, but I don't see a slew of people going on those bike lanes. And you've taken a lane away from commuters.
That's right.
That's not fair to the community. It really is not fair. So that's what I would love for you all to please, please help us with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
My name is Robert P. in the name of Jesus.com. Okay, and I want to show you something that feels good. For one thing, I don't know if you know him, so I want to show you. This is the guy who runs stuff, right? And different with this, everybody, Jesus is God Almighty right here. So, see, this is one I represent, and I don't know a lot about this, but I heard the vice mayor, he's talking about what's, sometimes you have a structure on your lot and you have to bust it all down. and it was illegal. Well, it's just like, sanctuary city. This stuff is illegal. This is dealing with this, structures, principle, and all this, and so sometimes we have to take something that was put in and we have to break it down, break the things that aren't right, and deal with that. Now, as far as this, I don't know, so I just wanted to get this in, and I'm going to say this before I go. She has to go. Janine Pierce has to go. And that's in the name of Jesus. What's right is justice. Justice. If I did that, I'd go to jail, what she did. All drunk driving and all that. So I'm going to get out of here. You don't have to tell me I'm out of here. But in the name of Jesus, and what is right. You know what's right? Right here. She got to go. And you ain't getting too far behind.
Thank you. And just so you know, and Mr. Pete, you can actually always speak all the amount of time you have. I just want to make sure it's on the topic. That's the important thing. Okay, sir? So it's not about going, it's about just staying on the topic.
I just wanted to get that out about her name.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
I'm Joe Weinstein, President of Citizens About Responsible Planning, or CARP. We sent you a letter earlier today, and I must say that our principal concerns with density, you've heard plenty about the traffic impacts, which are magnified because the state is operating under a rather silly theory that the less parking you have, the less traffic you're going to have. So you are trying to creatively cope with that, and I think that what Councilman Supernaw suggested is maybe one of the tools you would have, namely to proceed to find that more areas indeed are parking impacted. But the principal tool you have is indeed to cut down the size of the units so that they really conform to the original idea of a granny flat. The proposed, I'm glad to see the direction of movement on the suggested sizes, but in reality, the granny flat does not have to be anything like 800 square feet. And I know this from my personal experience. My son constructed himself a one-story, full-service house, comfortable for permanent living for himself and at least one other person. And it was all done on a footprint of under 400 square feet. Very attractive house. It can be done. So if in fact you really want to go for the concept of a granny flat rather than an excuse to bring in intolerable density, it can be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Thank you. My name is Maureen Neely. I'm the president of the Belmont Heights Community Association, and I would like to thank the council and staff as well for consideration of this ordinance. I know what the state was asking and requiring, and the staff has done a good job of hitting all the spots and trying to make it unique to Long Beach. We have an overarching observation about the ADU ordinance as it currently is presented, and then a couple of specific suggestions, which I think we've heard tonight. We'd also like to note that several of our residents did speak at the public comment period at the July 6th Planning Commission, so I think the Planning Commission heard us there as well. As a volunteer leader at one of the city's oldest neighborhood associations, I've had an experience with how 2 homes on a lot impacts the community. Our board understands that accessory dwelling units do not just affect individual parcel owners. The ramifications include impacts on sunlight, breezes, noise, and pollution. Housing more people on a single lot increases the school population, utility needs, parking, and traffic. So for these reasons, we urge you to weigh carefully the size and the placement of the additional units. 10, 20 years down the road, as more lots include secondary units, it makes sense that we plan today for less concrete and more open space. These attributes make for good neighbors. Specifically tonight, though, we hope you amend the ordinance to what Councilwoman Price has suggested, which is reduce the ADU size to 800 square feet or 50% of the existing primary dwelling, whichever is less. Increase the required amount of accompanying open space from 25% to 30%. And we do think that these minor amendments will still achieve the state's intent to create more available housing, and the smaller size should translate into more affordable housing, especially for young adults just starting out, new graduates getting on their feet, studios, extended family needs, even for older residents who want to downsize yet still live in their neighborhood. So these make sense. So thank you for consideration of this request. We know that every district does have different needs, but we do think these two small changes will work well throughout the city, achieving the intent of the state's legislation, keeping our Long Beach neighborhoods desirable, sustainable, and ultimately livable. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next speaker, please. These are the last two speakers, and the public speaking list is closed.
Hi, Mayor and City Council. I have to be honest, I'm not that well read on this subject because of the many issues that City Development Services has going on with regards to like the general plan and land use elements and CSIP. So I really didn't know that much about it, and I've just recently read up on it. And I just want to talk to you about some of my questions and concerns, and that's why I showed up today and wasn't able to write anything in advance. My district is District 3. I live in Bluff Park. Susie is my council rep, and her initial statement that staff is reacting to the state regulations or state mandates regarding this issue, that's why the city initiated. I am really confused about that. I'm just learning that we operate under a charter, and so we're a charter city. So I read about being a charter city, and one of the foundational aspects of being a charter city is that when it comes to municipal affairs, the city's charter overrides state regulations. And a lot of times, especially when it comes to court issues, this is especially true with land use and zoning decisions. So I keep hearing that the state has new regulations and that we must adopt these. So I just have questions about that. If you could answer that after my period talking. The primary advantage of being a charter, as I understand it, is it allows greater authority for a city's governance than provided by the state law. We know best what should be done in our city. And I think that we need to have a larger conversation about what it means to be a charter city. Linda Tatum from Development Services kept talking about what the state requires, and the state law limits our ability on what to do, and I'm just confused on being a charter city and state regulations. So I appreciate when Ms. Price asked for making what she called increased density bearable for our neighborhoods, yet I'm confused with regards to the document that was put out by Development Services on October 10th from city staff regarding the recommendation on this ordinance. Their statement is an ADU is not considered an additional unit for density purposes, and that's really concerning to me, especially since we're having such an uproar with regards to land use elements and density. I'm not sure how that applies here, and that is very confusing to me. The document states that ADU areas may be designated based on criteria that can include like water and sewer, and the impact of ADUs on traffic flow and public safety. As Susie probably remembers from our community meeting, I'm very concerned about Redondo Corridor, 4th Street Corridor, and traffic flow bike lanes getting into my neighborhood. Have studies been done with regards to this issue before, or is this going to be done after some of those things come into effect?
Thank you very much.
So I would just appreciate it if you would answer some of those questions with regards to that, and also how are these covenants going to be?
Thank you. Time is up. Thank you. We got to keep the time. Next speaker, please.
Good evening. My name is Allie Shebley, and I am at Moral Pole because I am a residential architect in the neighborhood, or in Long Beach, and I also am a citizen currently living in an accessory dwelling unit, a legal one, of course. First and foremost, I want to commend staff on their hard work. I do not envy your position at all. And I think what you guys have done to regulate local ordinances and address the state mandate is awesome. Additionally, I want to commend the council on the points that they made in addressing what they're calling the 3 amendments to what the staff is currently doing. I do want to address a fourth point that I don't think is spoken for that I think would address some further concerns that the community has and still allow for the ADUs in conformance to what the staff is proposing. And that is to add another overlay, and that being that your existing home and the property should be conforming before you add a secondary unit. I think an issue that we have in the 3rd district and a lot of the parking impacted areas is that a lot of the garages are only one car. The housing, a house in the R1 district technically needs 2 garage spots. So if we address the main house before allowing an accessory dwelling unit, that would help limit the ADUs and the density and address our current situation, which is leading to parking impacted zones. I think the map of the access to transit areas is phenomenal. I love that. I think it puts a chip on my shoulder being a resident of Long Beach and having that much access to public transit. However, I think the reality is not everyone's using it, and that is why we continue to have parking impacted zones. So addressing the existing home nonconformities before allowing an accessory dwelling unit would also help the situation at hand. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to go back to the council. I just want to make a comment, and I have a question as well, and then I'm going to turn this back over to Councilwoman Price. One, let me just add on the non-conforming or possible non-conforming related issues to the property. Is that addressed? That's actually a great idea. Is that addressed in the ordinance?
Mayor, that's a great question. It is not currently addressed, and again, I would defer to the city attorney. However, the city's land use and development regulations have long rested on the premise that what we call legal non-conforming structures are vested, meaning that the use was legally permitted and complied with the laws at the time it was built. There's always been a presumption of protection for those units, and those legal non-conforming cases result when a unit is permitted and the code or some standard changes subsequent to that approval that creates essentially what we call a legal non-conforming status. And property owners generally have long relied on the protection of them when they go through the process and get a permit and legally construct a unit.
Please keep
that
sharing
they have
this,
the protection that
video.
the city isn't going to change the code later, and they then have to be required to come up to speed or retroactively to some new requirement. So to your question, yes, that is something that the city could do, but that is not anticipated in the ordinance as it's currently written.
Mr. Parkin, is that something that we would able to do?
Yes, I think what Linda indicated is there is such a thing as a legal non-conforming use that's allowed, and we wouldn't require that to be changed during this process. But if during the permitting process or during the inspection process there was found to be illegal conversions or some sort of other code violation, then yes, that could be addressed at that time.
Okay, it would seem that, I mean, for the benefit of building an accessory dwelling unit, that the property owner would have a property that is conforming to all the other requirements before we would address and getting the permits to move forward. Would that be something that, I'm obviously the maker of the motion would have to, but I think that we have so many. I think one of the big issues, which I know is harder to address, is the numerous non-conforming properties that we have that folks aren't going through the process, and I think that this will be a great way of addressing that. Well, can I ask a question to staff too? Because I just want to make sure I'm understanding this right. And I obviously support the reduction to 800 square feet. I'll tell you personally, owning a property that's about 800 square feet, that's enormous. So I think, 800 square feet is a very comfortable, large living area. And so I think the idea of this is always to build, I think, a small unit possibly for a transitioning senior or a family member, it's part of the family. I think certainly it wasn't to create a second home in backyards. So can I ask you, on the bedroom issue, because I'm a little bit just confused. If you're planning to do one bedroom, Ms. Tatum, can you only build up to 450 square feet? And if you do two, can you explain that piece to me?
The chart we were referring to is actually, if you go to, let me call the page 11 of the ordinance, which is attached as, let's see, it's, let me give you the number. I presume that that's the table you're referring to, Mayor?
Well, I think you had mentioned, and which is why I was looking at you had mentioned, I just want to make sure you can walk me through this. So if I am applying for an accessory dwelling unit, and I only want to build one bedroom, versus, let's say, I contemplated two. If I want to build one bedroom, can I still build, would I then at that point still be able to build up to the now proposed 800 square feet, or do I have to build two bedrooms to get to 800?
No, you can build one bedroom up to that 800 square feet. That 800 is a maximum of the unit size, and it doesn't require a particular bedroom configuration.
Okay, so what happens inside the square footage is not connected to the amount of square feet that you can build.
That's correct.
I was just curious, I know that different cities have a range of different square footage. And in San Jose's case, if I just could ask, just because I think it's a community that's similar to ours, you have a lot of suburban neighborhoods, you have a downtown. So they're doing 600 to 800 square feet. I'm trying to understand what the 600 to 800 is. Is that a range, or because obviously you can go below 600 square feet, or is that the floor?
We're not familiar specifically with that. We looked at a number of other cities, and we generally looked at it for their maximum allowable size. So where there is a range, it's not entirely clear to us the kind of what drives that range, and it could be a number of factors. Generally, I would kind of speculate that it might be something like the unit size, or even the property, the size of the property, or it could even be the size of the primary
Anybody want to
unit
tell
that
me
drives
how big is 800
how they
feet?
parse
That's a good question.
that range.
How big is 800?
And can you repeat the minimum again?
Our current minimum, the minimum lot size that you could build a unit is 4,800 square feet. If you have a lot size that's smaller than that, you're not eligible to build a second.
The minimum square footage total for the accessory.
Of the lot.
Yeah. No, of the unit.
Oh, of the unit. Right now, our minimum unit size is 640 square feet.
That doesn't seem.
Do you mean the unit, or are you relating it to the bedroom count?
The accessory dwelling unit.
The minimum size is the 640. Let me let Kara answer that. But
thank you.
We'll get a clarification. Mayor, thank you for the question. Just to clarify, the minimum unit sizes, there's a couple of categories, and I'm going to try to not overcomplicate it. But for a studio, that's a detached, for example, it's 300 square feet.
So I got it. So the one bedroom there is the 450.
Correct. Correct.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify. And I do think before I turn this back over, as I appreciate the conversation, I think the conversation is going in the right direction. I just want to clarify one of the questions. We get asked that question about charter cities often, and there are obviously additional protections for charter cities in many cases, and in many cases there are not. And so, do you want to, Mr. City Attorney, maybe explain that?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. You are correct on a charter city. We have what we call home rule in a charter city, which does allow certain planning and implementation authority beyond what a general law city is capable of. But when the state legislature decides or determines that the matter is a matter of statewide concern, they can pass legislation applicable to both general law cities and charter cities. And in fact, that's the case with the ADU law. They specifically found that it would apply to local agencies, both charter cities and county charters, chartered counties, pursuant to Government Code Section 65852.2. So it is applicable to the city of Long Beach, and the state has, over time, determined certain things that used to be a home rule or a charter city purview as a municipal affair has become that of a statewide concern, and an example of that would be in the area of voting and elections.
And I think that's correct. And I just wanted to add, so I think we oftentimes, whenever a state law is passed, the very first thing we look at is whether charter cities are included or not included. And sometimes we're not, and oftentimes we are, of course, after your analysis. So let's keep going. I know we have a motion on the floor right now. Councilwoman Price.
I'm going to withdraw. I was going to explain municipal affairs versus statewide affairs, so thank you. I was kind of going back to, public policy school. I was very excited to hear that.
Thank God.
Thank you.
Let's move on, please.
Yes, my question is, if you have an illegal dwelling in the back, and all of a sudden it was only 300 and some odd feet, could we bring it up to code? Like, say, if it was illegal, could they start, and they wanted to bring it up to, like, say, another 300, would that be possible? Would they have to tear it down and start all over?
Right on.
The laws that are adopted in this ordinance would apply to that unit, so they would have the option to, if it did not comply as it was currently built, they would have to modify it to a point where it was compliant with the law.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilmember Supernaw.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank Councilwoman Price for accepting my friendly on the parking. And also, I just want to address one statement that was made. The suggesting that council is supporting density, I don't think that frames this issue correctly.
No.
We are trying to mitigate a state mandate. If you want to spend that as supporting density, I guess you're free to say that, but I certainly don't see it that way. But there just seems to be a lot of moving parts here. I appreciate the city attorney is going to craft this and come back at 30 days, we'd have another shot of it. One of the last things I heard was we can have a one-bedroom unit up to 800 square feet. Am I correct on that?
That is correct.
Okay, so much of my district is impacted by Cal State Long Beach. That's a lot to do with the parking issues. The other thing we have an issue with is bedroom splitting. And it's very hard to detect these once they're done. I believe if you allow one-bedroom units of 800 square feet, you're inviting bedroom splitting. And so I'm going to rethink my support of this item based on just so many issues here. I'm going to reserve any comments to further.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Councilwoman Mungo.
I'd like to make a friendly. I was looking at page 11 of the written document, and I think that the 4,800 square feet so my original intent was that there would be a graduated scale, 600 square feet, 800 square feet. I'm trying to mitigate the impacts to our neighborhoods. And so first, I think that because of so many things going on in our city right now, now is not the right time to take on this issue. So I'm also rethinking my support of this item, even though I generally wanted to have this dialogue. I just think that there's so many moving parts of things going on that I'm hesitant to get on board. But I would be potentially more supportive when it comes back if we were limiting the lot size, if you did not have a lot greater than, I would say 5,200 square feet. So if your lot was 5,200 square feet and above, you could potentially have an ADU, but if it was below that, then I think that we should restrict it. I'd be open to hearing the maker of I'd be open to hearing the maker of the motion's ideas on that. Would you be open to a friendly that would, so the 4,800 as the minimum lot size going up to 5,200?
Yes.
Wonderful.
And just to clarify, I think, and can I clarify this, Councilman? I think what we're saying is possibly if it was between 48 to 52, maybe I misunderstood. You could build up to 600 square feet, but if it was up over 52, you could build 800. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying in this new phase, this is kind of giving us a trial period where I would say 5,200 is the minimum lot size. Let's look at this. Let's bring it back in a year. Let's see how many people built ADUs. Let's see where they requested them. Let's see where they didn't, and let's learn. But when we have a majority of the units in the city,
arguing is confident, but when it comes
touchdown, I think that's support.
Just as long as they don't take a knee.
As the maker of the motion is that properties would not be eligible for an accessory dwelling unit under 5,200 square feet. That's what I'm hearing.
That would be the front of the.
And I would accept that.
Okay, so just let's go ahead and clarify the motion before we have, I know Vice Mayor's up next. Mr. City Attorney, can you clarify the motion just so that everyone knows where we are?
I will certainly attempt to do so, Mayor. Thank you. The motion would be to adopt staff's recommendation with now 4 amendments. One is to reduce from 1,000 square feet to 8,000 or 800 square feet, or 50%, whichever is less, for the unit size. To increase from 25% to 30% open space requirement. To add preferential parking districts to the parking impacted areas as defined previously. And number 4, I believe, is, if I understand correctly, is to increase the minimum lot size from 4,800 square feet to 5,200 square feet. So the impact of that would be, if your lot is 5,199 square feet or less, you would not be allowed to have an accessory dwelling unit. Is that correct?
I believe that's the motion. Okay. Okay, so let me go ahead and go back to Vice Mayor Richardson.
Couple questions. So I get it, folks want to make it tight. I'm all about that, limit it, and limit the impact on neighborhoods. But where did the 4,800 number come from? How was the 5,200 number justified? What is the average lot size in Long Beach? What I don't want to do is inadvertently create a policy that half the city is excluded from participation.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Why don't we go ahead and have staff answer the questions on that to Vice Mayor Richardson?
Vice Mayor Richardson, thank you for your question. Just to clarify, so your first question was where did the 4,800 square feet came from? We used our existing granny flat ordinance as a starting point, and that is the existing minimum lot size that is in our ordinance. So we use that as the starting point. Furthermore, as earlier stated, actually I didn't state this earlier, I apologize. Using the R1N lot inventory of the city as an example, so that's with over 53,000 R1N lots in the city representing the traditional single-family zones, there are 87% of properties that are over 4,800 square feet, which means conversely only 13% of lots would be excluded from building an ADU. Furthermore, in the current R2 zones of the city, which are duplex zoning, the minimum lot size is 4,800, and the zoning ordinance basically has an existing queue that says 4,800 is the minimum lot size to allow for 2 units, and therefore the 3 reasons I just stated were compelling enough evidence for us to use 4,800 as the threshold. Thank you.
So a 4,800 square foot lot can actually have 2 full units on it, but not an accessory dwelling unit under the current framework. Is that what you're telling me?
That is correct. However, that is not a guaranteed number of units because any proposed development has to comply with all of those development standards, the floor area ratio, the setbacks, the parking, the height, and the open space. So that 2 units for the 4,800 is a theoretical maximum. It is not a guaranteed number.
So what I don't want to do is continue to create policy out of numbers that we're just tossing out there. I like that you have the justification for 4,800. I'm okay with evaluating 5,200, but I'd like to see what that analysis is on 5,200. The way that you broke down, hey, this is what percentage in R1N and the other zones. I'd like to understand that, between, the difference between 4,800 and 5,200 and how that fundamentally changes the program. So is there a way that we can come back with some data on that before we cast a final vote on something like this? Or, I'm kind of open to council members. Do you want to just address how you would reconcile that or where you came from?
So I was actually...
So Vice Mayor?
I'd like to have back and forth, if that's okay.
Absolutely, Councilwoman Longo.
So I was actually mining data on the assessor portal, and I was trying to go back and forth on some of the SFRs and the square footage on them, because I'm trying to be able to carve out the ability to try this, and then, but not necessarily at 90% of the city. I'm saying, let's try it at a more reasonable amount, and I thought 5,200 carved out another percentage of the city that actually gave us some good data. I don't
That
want to
actually
be.
makes a lot of sense. You want to pilot it on a smaller set of
That's a good idea.
properties. That makes a lot of sense. So is there a way, staff, can you tell me the difference? Like how, between 4,800 and 5,200, how many housing units are excluded between now and then? Do we have that data available? Or Stacy, is that available on your?
That's a harder number, so.
I would be shocked if staff can't pull that. I'm sure staff can pull that data.
Yeah. So when you go on the portal, you can do a filter, and then when you filter, you can filter for single-family residents, single
We can pull
units.
that up right now. Let's just agree on the number and move it forward tonight.
Why don't we keep going through and we'll see if staff can find a number, what that number is, okay? Next up is actually Councilman Mungo.
I was gonna answer the question.
Okay, so we'll move on to Councilman Oster.
I think some of my questions were answered. I just wanted to go back because I asked the question originally, what was the average lot size? And I get numbers on R1N, and that was, you gave me a 54%. Yeah. So the number was 54% of homes available in R1N would be eligible for accessory dwelling units. Was that the answer? 54% number.
Where did 54 come
Councilman
from?
Austin, thank
It
you
was
for your
mentioned.
question. To clarify, you've asked, as the ordinance is presently proposed, what percentage of the city's R1N lots based solely on lot size, so not on anything else like lot coverage or floor area ratio, would be eligible for an ADU, and that would be 87%. That would be based on a 4,800 square foot lot size.
And so what we're trying to figure out is what would be the eligibility under 5,200?
And the number for the 52 is roughly, the numbers that we have here are very general because what we did is in our data mining, we mined it for, we didn't consider all the properties in the city. We considered the properties that had one unit on it because you have to have one existing unit to be eligible. So it's not the entire universe of lots, but we have a total of, looks like roughly just around 30%, just over 30%, and that's very rough. So that's,
I'll just say that I'm challenged with the direction we're going in right now because it started out, and I want to thank my colleague, Councilmember Mungo, who originally brought this forward as a solution to our housing crisis, not only in the city and in response to state legislation.
Correct.
We have, I think, have a responsibility as a city to help solve this crisis as well. I know we're looking at other avenues. We're studying our land use element. Housing is going to be a key issue of discussion, not only tonight but for many years to come. And let's just keep in mind that this is a Tuesday night. This is a recommendation that is coming from staff. There's been a lot of dialogue. I think there is a will here to get somewhere. But I don't want to get to the point where we're restricting our ability and restricting our residents' ability to help their family members with housing, right? To restrict our ability to truly start providing answers to the issues of homelessness, right? And let's keep in mind what the intent of these accessory dwelling units are. Let's keep in mind the intent of the state legislation. We get to the point where we're just trying to restrict it down so that it doesn't fit in everybody's backyard or next door neighbor. So that's not gonna really fly with, I think, the intent of the legislation or what we have asked staff to come back and study. So I just want to keep that in mind as well.
So I appreciate that. I was a person who, when this first passed at the state, I brought this to council to say, let's get our arms around this and see where we are. I definitely feel that, but what I'm feeling is a considerable hesitation on too many open items and questions. So there are residences, single-family residences throughout our city that have already, and I don't want to jump in front of Councilmember Supernall's question, 6 people living in a single-family residence that is a 2-bedroom. And we have, like you mentioned, the non-conforming, and an opportunity to get these properties to conform would be
Compliance.
ideal. And this is a huge shift and a huge change during a time that is uncertain. We don't have a current approved LUE, we don't have a current general plan, we don't have any of these things. And so for me, I'm happy to say, bring it back as is in January or February when we've had time to nail down all the other components of our city and we've had additional healthy dialogue. But we're not there yet. So I still don't know, if you have the single family residence in the front and you add an accessory dwelling unit, what is the maximum occupancy of people living on this property? I don't actually know.
I think I still have the floor.
Oh, I thought you were asking me.
I do want to ask a question of staff. This law has already gone into effect, is that correct?
That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
If someone today wants to build an accessory dwelling unit, can they do it?
Yes, until the city adopts its own local ordinance, the state regulations are applied.
So right now, the exercise we're going under is to actually get some local control.
Thus I brought the item 6 months ago to
I
council.
got it. But pushing it out limits our ability to have it.
Absolutely, I get
so
that.
I want to get back to the intent.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'll wait till my turn again.
Let's go through the rest of the, there's folks that are queued up, so, Councilor Supino.
Thank you. Just one question and one follow-up, and that,
Thing that we're doing here will not speak specifically to the occupancy of the unit. And again, I'm going to specify this very generally, and the city attorney can weigh in, but cities are very specifically limited from regulating occupancy by the health and safety code. And court case after court case has resulted in cities
I'm back, everybody.
to regulate occupancy
Just made
by
a quick
being
slip up.
declared null and void because the state has a compelling interest. And again, I'm not speaking from our perspective, it's just how the state articulates this issue. The state's compelling issue is that people have the opportunity for housing, and they're typically less concerned with the quality of the housing than the fact that they are and do have the opportunity to be housed. So the courts have repeatedly thrown out cases where the cities have attempted to limit occupancy. So we have, through our zoning code, we have absolutely no control over how many people live in a unit.
okay. So that's the first part of the question. The second part, before I get to that, I just want to commend Councilmember Austin that, yes, we do need to get back to the intent. And I just want to explore the unintended consequences because we have a duty to
This
the
is
public.
what's ended up happening with
what
the
could
state
possibly
law,
happen
which
here.
is
So
undermining
in
the local
addition
control
to
of the
no
city.
controls on
So
the
now
number
it's
of folks
pushing
living
the
in the
dramatic density.
ADU,
It's outrageous. This is
a
what Janet's been
scenario
talking
might
about
be
for
that you
decades.
have a 3-bedroom residence, single person occupancy, who builds the ADU, moves into the ADU, and then rents out the 3 bedrooms. And that's what we found to accommodate like student housing and whatnot. I guess that's not a question, it's just a statement of reality. So thank you for your time.
Can we wrap this up?
Councilwoman Mungo?
So with all of these, I recognize that 30% is a small amount, but I think that it is still a large enough amount to see a good test case. So I asked my colleagues to stand with Councilmember Price and myself, and I see Councilmember Pierce is the seconder on the motion, and support the 5,200 square feet as a phase 1, and to get a report back from the development services in a year of the number of permits pulled and locations on all of that, so we can see where we are. And by then, hopefully we can have seen how many cases were individuals who were non-conforming and became conforming, and what the health of the city was and what great things it turned around. Or we can see that if in 6 months we have to bring it back because there's too many requests that don't meet the requirements because 5,200 is too great, we can see it at that time. But I'm going to stand with 5,200. I think
Mom goes the
30%
Republican, and she was bringing some real
right. I'm confident that
limited government and clear compromise to this issue.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. It's been a good, healthy debate. I didn't think this item was going to go so long tonight. So
I want to say, I think where we started, 5,200 square feet, 1,000 square feet, we've come back a lot, and that should be acknowledged. So we, had almost unanimous support here for limiting from 1,000 down to 800. That's a good step in the right direction. Almost unanimous support from the public comment on that. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think we have clarity in terms of our exposure while we don't have an ordinance, and that it's in our interest to speed it up. I get that as well. The one place that I do have some rub, and I'm going to appeal to the maker of the motion and the maker of the friendlies and see if we can not go into a political up or down on this. I think people want to get to the right place. Going from staff's recommendation of 78% down to 30% is a big, 87%, excuse me, down to 30%. That is a big difference. And I feel, and I know that certain areas of town do have smaller lot sizes, some have larger lot sizes, and it will completely exclude certain areas of town, which wouldn't be a good sample for a pilot. So I'm going to propose a friendly amendment that will meet in the middle at 5,000. I'm going to ask, before I offer it, I'm going to ask staff to tell me what that does in terms of between 30 and 87%. Where do we land with 5,000?
I'd like to first just clarify that when Councilwoman Mungo asked about the number of units that were the 5,200 square feet, the response of 30% was that is the number that is, the 30% was that we have 30% that are 5,200, which means that above that number, we have approximately 70%. So I just want to make sure that that is clear. So there would be 70% of the city's housing stock that will be eligible to have a second unit on it.
That's very different.
That's very different.
That's not what I heard. So can I just get the clarification?
Let's get some clarification.
So you're saying that if we go to 5,200 square feet, we have about 70% of the city that would be eligible still?
Again, that's a very rough estimate, and I'm going to say 65 to 70%.
Okay. Thank you. So Vice Mayor Richardson, you have the floor.
Thank you. That's a big difference. I think I'm okay with it. I'm okay with going with 50.
Thank you. I thought the number looked surprising considering the assessment portal.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Pierce.
I think my questions were answered on the percentage. I think staying at around 70% is a good test case. I think coming back down the road and looking at what's being effective, what's working, if we need to make adjustments after the land use element and everything else, I think it's a smart move. So I appreciate the good conversation back here on how we craft good policies. So thank you.
And Councilwoman Price.
Thank you. I too appreciate the discussion and the offers by everyone to try to work a solution that's acceptable to all of us. What I don't want to do, and I hope we can move forward on this tonight and get the ball rolling and move into the next step, is to just kick the can down the road, because this is a reality. This is a reality that we, as a result of a state mandate, have to deal with. And I don't want us to get into
They have to deal with this. They got to get this ADU thing figured out.
I think we've
The funny thing
mitigated
is
it
that
to a place
the
that
Assemblyman
our
from Long Beach
residents,
voted against it,
that staff
probably because of
can
this
live with,
reason.
and that we feel still provides a sufficient housing supply. I have to say, I would not have been okay with the 30%. So I'm glad that was clarified, because the whole point of this is to provide opportunities to have additional housing. And if there were 30%, it really wouldn't do that. So I asked my colleagues to move forward on this, and let's get this in motion so that staff can incorporate these amendments with the city attorney's office and give us an ordinance that we can work with. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Excellent comments. There's a motion and a second, which is repeated by the city attorney. Please cast your votes.
Andrews. Motion carries.
Great, unanimous. Thank you very much. And I think that was a very good discussion, and I want to thank everybody. We are just finished our 3 long hearings, so now we're going to the regular agenda of the City Council. First item up will be the item that was pulled from the consent calendar. So that'll be that's item number 4. It was pulled by Councilwoman Gonzalez.
Yes, I wanted to pull this item because first, it's on the consent calendar, so I wanted to ask our city attorney why it was placed on the consent calendar.
Give me a few minutes,
versus
everybody. I'm
regular
gonna
agenda.
break away and I'll come back in a few minutes, okay?
That is our typical
Thanks for
process
watching.
when resolutions